morning and a very warm welcome to Thinking Out Loud at HOK. My name is Farah and I'm the Marketing Principal for HOK's London studio. And so to our speaker this morning, Adam has lived in London for 25 years. From a very young age, Adam was most captivated by art. Even during his formative years, he was known as an artist, and certainly by the time he had reached secondary school, he had cemented this reputation amongst his peers. Attending Newcastle University for 4 years to study fine art, he graduated in the year 2000. He set up his studio here in London and was determined to make his mark. Adam's first public art installation in Golden Square hit the front cover of The Independent at the tender age of 24, and he was covered in other broadsheets. Adam has since exhibited internationally, including at Gagosian Gallery, New York, Goss Michael Foundation, Dallas, and Beit Al-Zubair Museum in Oman. Adam has worked with private collectors, including George Michael. Incidentally, as many of you may recall, George Michael's art collection was recently auctioned at Christie's earlier this year and included 5 works by Adam, one of which reached 30 times its estimate. Adam has collaborated with fashion and music brands, including Lorenz Scott, where he created work as part of New York Fashion Week, and his art went on to become part of Mick Jagger's private collection. Adam currently has an exhibition on display in London with Encounter Contemporary, and he is working in his studio on a large-scale commission for a collector in Mexico. Just to share, I was introduced to Adam by the healthcare team here at HOK, who had collaborated with him on the art installation at Royal Papworth Hospital. Naturally, I was rather daunted and slightly apprehensive, having never collaborated so closely with an artist before. Just to say, Adam has been absolutely delightful to work with. As we've prepared for this talk, we've met at Brixton Market several times, chatting away over coffees and a slice of banana loaf. And he is without ego and so self-deprecating and has been an absolute joy to work with. And so, without further ado, I really am very happy to introduce the utterly charming and incredibly talented Adam Ball. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Farah, for that kind introduction. I will try and be charming, failing that, at least remotely entertaining. And so, I should warn you, as an artist, I don't write often. It's not that I can't write, it's just I'm better with a paintbrush. As such, the last time I wrote anything of length was a while ago, and it took the form of a love letter, somewhat of a dying art, I fear. Of course, I'm not here to discuss this, but it's not a bad place to start, as art and romance are intrinsically linked. In both cases, you must follow with blind, irrational faith, even when you have little idea where you are going. To do either well, you must do it with reckless abandon, and at times, even self-sacrificially. Few consciously choose to be an artist, for in many ways, it just doesn't make sense. You start, and it can be hard to turn back. As much as it's possible to do so, I have dedicated my life in the pursuit of one thing. In fact, I've done nothing else. Anyone who has relentlessly followed a creative path will tell you it can take as much from you as it rewards. So why do it? Is one of the oldest professions becoming more or less relevant? Can an artist make a significant difference on today's fast-paced society? It is an odd thing, after all, to sit in a room all day on your own and create something that may never be seen. Over the next 20 minutes, I will attempt to shine some light on this. I first decided I wanted to be an artist when I was very young, which, it is fair to say, was received with a mixed response. Recently, my 8-year-old son looked at me with his big brown eyes and said, "I want to be an artist." Suddenly, I understood how my father felt all those years earlier. "Great, son," I said. Let's discuss this. For in reality, a studio is not the place you, aged 8, think it to be. It's an office with no furniture. And in my case, no heating. I like my studio sparse and cold. It's not a place to get comfortable in. I eat lunch every day on a concrete floor. Admittedly, I could buy a chair, but that would be to miss the point. Like every other artist I know, lunch is purely perfunctory and certainly doesn't involve drinking. And like most artists I know, we keep regular hours. I, for one, need a routine because to maintain a creative output over many years, I found a certain amount of structure to be essential. The life of an artist may now be very different from that of the past. But to succeed, there's the same need to be driven and focused as there is in any other field. Apart from the lucky few, that entails long hours and lots of mistakes. Isn't that the truth? I've made my fair share. Today's artist must, above all, have integrity. But also, and this may sound like an anathema, be a businessman and a communicator. If you can't communicate with your audience, you can't connect. I asked a major collector recently, one who meets lots of creatives and visits lots of studios, what's the most important trait an artist needs? His answer surprised me slightly. Be a good person. Learning to relate to your audience is essential. Art is communication. Visual art is a great leveler, and arguably more so than any of the other arts. Visual art has the ability to communicate across all societies and to speak equally to diverse populations. Contemporary art is almost always created for an international audience and to connect across cultures and across time. A painting from many centuries ago can communicate ideas of what it was to live then, in a way historical documents can't, but also communicate today with as much strength and relevance as it did then. But in my opinion, the hardest part, assuming you want to still be creating aged 80, is to stay relevant and to evolve continually over a long period of time, to remain alert to what is going on around you and allow your practice to change, but to do so in a way that doesn't leave your audience behind. Here I am in my studio, standing on a chair, because I'm making a big drawing, and also I'm not very tall. I'm just going to show you a few installation shots from shows in the past, over the last decade or so. You see how my work's evolved. Goss Gallery in Dallas. This is the Taman Negara rainforest in Malaysia, the oldest rainforest in the world. More recent show. Constantly inspired, right? Even though a relatively short career, it's likely early work will have little in common with later work. This requires remaining constantly creatively inspired, which is almost impossible. The inevitable creative block is always lurking around the next corner, ready to derail you. I've learned how to navigate this better with age. In my 20s, periods of creative uncertainty, where you question everything, were dark times, and usually came out of nowhere. I'll take a certain amount of reassurance from this quote from the writer Robert Hughes. The greater the artist, the greater the doubt. Perfect confidence is granted to the less talented as a consolation prize. Thank you for that, Robert. Even if it's not true, it's good to hear. Distraction helps. Perspective helps. Age helps. In any period of creative uncertainty, I try to doubly commit. With every opportunity that closes, to knock on 2 more doors. Not easy if you fear rejection, but then growing a thick skin is the necessary life armor for any creative. I often find my best work comes from times of necessity or urgency, with the need to make something work. How has art changed? Over the last couple of decades, so many more options have become available to an artist. Early on, especially at art school, artists should be professional thieves to seek, source, and drain inspiration from every available opportunity, to assimilate, mix, match, and merge, to create by learning from different visual languages. As Picasso once said, bad artists copy, good artists steal. It is said that there's nothing new in art and that everything has been done before. But with society, technology, and science progressing faster than ever, it creates possibilities and opportunities that weren't possible or even known about a decade before. For example, a few years ago, I used a US laboratory to grow my blood and photograph my chromosomes to enable me to make a self-portrait from the inside out, directly from my DNA. Here it is, installed on the wall in the Center of Contemporary Art in Bahrain, a project that wouldn't have been conceptually possible a generation before. However, it's essential to gradually build your own language and find your voice. This can take a long time and is never-ending. It may take years to hone down what interests you and to have enough confidence in what you are saying to commit to it. Collaboration is then possible, enabling an artist to reach a wider audience. To have collaborated with a commercial brand a few decades ago could have been seen as selling out or lacking integrity, with some notable exceptions. Dali did it, as did Warhol, of course. But in the main, advertising or collaboration with a brand was a potentially dangerous thing. Now it is an opportunity, and with it, the possibility of opening up a new audience. All good collaboration should end up in a unique place that neither party could have got to on their own. I have collaborated a few times, often to raise money for charity. Here is my interpretation of The Desert Boots for Clarks, a 1960s classic, reinterpreted to go on sale to raise money for the landmine charity the Halo Trust, with an accompanying exhibition of works at the V&A. The ultimate in collaboration is public art. The opportunity to create something in a different setting is the opportunity to leave a legacy, often creating art on a different scale with many other considerations and complications. If you create a work of art and place it in a gallery, people choose to come and see it. Artwork exhibited in a gallery is likely to be for sale and then go on to multiple different venues. When public art is viewed, it is mostly viewed by people who haven't chosen to see it, and perhaps who have even helped pay for it. My first experience of this was a few years out of art college, when in 2002, I installed a 10-meter painting in the middle of Soho, stretched over a 50-foot scaffolding tower in Golden Square. I work with many public bodies, but no public money, and I naively thought it would take 6 months, but it ended up taking over 2 years, something many of you can relate to, I'm sure. It was an early lesson in persistence, bureaucracy, and red tape. Once it was unveiled, the response was exciting to watch, if a little daunting. It made the front page of a national newspaper, which is something I am unlikely to repeat. What makes good or bad public art? Well, firstly, and crucially, it must be embedded in its environment and relate to its surroundings. Any good contemporary art will bring an audience and initiate debate. The best public art becomes iconic and will define an area, changing its setting forever. The Angel of the North is a good example. Shortly after it was installed in 1998, I went to view it. There was a lot of excitement, but I was also surprised by the negativity, and on occasion, even outright hostility. I spoke to people who lived in sight of it, and several made negative assumptions that weren't in fact correct. For example, people commented that the artist hadn't considered how it would age, when in fact, Corten steel is meant to rust and is a key element of the aging process. Others mentioned it was by a motorway and nobody would see it. But because of its location, it's seen by 33 million people a year, one every second, making it one of the most viewed works of art in the world. Not a bad way of putting Gateshead on the map. I occasionally go back, and most locals would concede it was worth the investment of $800,000, and has been credited with accelerating the rate of business activity in the area, leading to the Angel era. How do we make art relate to its environment? It's a question I considered at length as I planned my recently opened installation at Royal Papworth Hospital. So if I may, I'll answer this using my own experience. In a word, I think it's research. I wanted the imagery used in my artwork to be inspired by the people who work there, and for them to have some sort of ownership over it. I collaborated with as many people that would meet me. I met with the chemistry department and layered their breakthrough drug into the composition. I met with pharmacy, nursing, and on one occasion, I even observed a lead thoracic surgeon remove part of a man's lung. Not something for the light-hearted. Whether I succeeded in this is for others to judge, but I certainly did my best to engage people in the process and research the subject. Over an 8-year period, I worked with HOK on the project, which was opened earlier this year by the Queen. The artwork was made from white fabric, hand-cut with a surgical scalpel, about 50 square meters in total. I could not find a manufacturer who would commit to taking a pristine white piece of fabric, so the artwork was photographed in very high res, and I flew to a factory in Poland whose specialist printed the imagery onto glass, constantly finessing the technique until the texture and fray of the fabric was visible. The artwork is backlit by an LED lighting system and pre-programmed to change color slowly throughout the year, warm in the winter and cool in the summer. If you return often, you would gradually see the work evolve over time, sure in the knowledge that on the same day next year, it will be the same color, continually changing and yet constant. It's called Until the Day You Feel Good, and it's my hope that it will be a moment of distraction as you arrive at the hospital. How can art improve recovery rates and mental well-being? At the start of the commission, I read the scientific reports that outline how patients recover more quickly if in sight of color or art. However, during the planning process, our 2-year-old daughter became unwell and ultimately needed surgery, a stressful period for any parent. But I remember what small visual differences made to our emotional state. We moved bed, and now in sight of light and color, and we almost instantly felt different. We were less stressed, and our daughter calmer. This gave me a real, visceral, emotional appreciation for the effects of color on the vulnerable. And so I engaged Jean-Gabriel Course on the project, a French color specialist who advised me on the effects of color on well-being and on mental health. As Jean-Gabriel stated, the gradually changing colors reflect the hospital as a dynamic place, evolving day after day. Color offers comfort and subtly enhances trust, which, in a project like this, is crucial in the wellness and healing journey. Art in hospitals. We are all evenly affected by color on a daily basis, but what is interesting is how we're affected by it. Whatever your race, age, or sex, it's the same. Orange, for example, helps boost optimism, inner strength, and happiness, and helps treat depression, negativity, stress, bereavement, or loss. Hence why there is a lot of orange on my installation during the winter. And fascinatingly, orange has a similar effect wherever you come from, whatever your profession, and even between humans and monkeys. Following the installation of visual art at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital, they revealed how it improved the mental well-being of patients receiving intrusive examinations, as well as ongoing treatments, such as chemotherapy. A study by the hospital's charity, CW+, discovered that art freed up beds earlier and reduced anxiety and even pain. 80% of women having a cervical examination stated that art had greatly improved their anxiety and experience. Even more remarkably, labor was 2 hours shorter when in sight of visual art. Having witnessed labor twice, I find this particularly extraordinary. For people having chemotherapy, levels of the stress hormone cortisol and feelings of depression dropped by 30%. For those having surgery, less anesthetic was needed. Hospital stays were on average 1 day shorter, and levels of cortisol nearly halved. Visual art has also been installed in Sheffield Children's Hospital and Guy's Hospital. A 2007 British study showed how art reduced a patient's length of stay in hospital, with a Dutch 2017 study illustrating that abstract art in particular resonated with patients. In 2018, a local hospital started to prescribe visits to Montreal Museum of Fine Arts. Michael Mullins, co-author of a recent study on hospital art, believes that size, placement, colour, and movement all matter more than style, suggesting how the art is exhibited is as important as the art itself. There is nothing new in placing art in hospitals, or in the belief it can make a difference to wellness. Leading artists of the day were commissioned to make pieces such as these great artists. Economic impact of public art. It is hard to evaluate the economic benefits of something that is open to all and free at the point of encounter, and even harder to track who is seeing it. However, to use one example, a temporary installation in New York by artist Olafur Eliasson saw 4 vast waterfalls installed across the city and drew an estimated audience of 1.4 million people. It cost this much to create, but it was estimated to have boosted tourism and local spending by this much, $69 million. Another temporary public art exhibition, called Chicago Cows on Parade, brought an estimated 2 million extra visitors to the city, with visitor spending estimated to have increased by $500,000 over the 3-month exhibition. One Chicago store saw a 40,000 boost in profits over its weekly projections, with other restaurants, hotels, and shops seeing a 20% increase in sales. A particularly successful example of a city that has embraced public art is Chicago. The city invested $500 million into Millennium Park, the location of the now world-famous Cloud Gates by Anish Kapoor. And this investment was estimated to have generated $2.6 billion in visitor spending and added $1.4 billion to local property prices, all within 10 years of its completion. To conclude, and then we can have some coffee. Successful public art should be so site-specific that it wouldn't work in any other context. The opposite of this is plop art, work that is made for a different environment and shipped in to improve a public site. But without the community connection, it is unlikely to succeed. An unfortunate example of this is Tilted Arc by the brilliant artist Richard Serra. In 1981, a critically acclaimed steel wall was placed in the middle of Washington Plaza at a cost of $175,000. But the public response was that it didn't enhance the environment and had been badly considered. A petition was started that ultimately saw the sculpture removed 8 years later and is now located in 3 separate warehouses. Personally, I think this is a shame, but you can't argue with public response. And it illustrates that even the best artworks by the best artists won't work unless they can engage the setting and the local audience. Even in this case, if a work has provoked debate and creative discourse, can it be seen as a failure, however unpopular it was? The Statue of Liberty was so disliked when it was donated by France to the US in 1884 that they nearly didn't raise the money to pay for the plinth alone, and is now iconic to the New York skyline. Public art may help regenerate an area or add to its beauty and have an economic impact on its city, but above all, it must inspire dialogue and add to the cultural debate. To finish, life as a creative, is it worth it? There may be easier ways to live a life but it gives you the opportunity to make a mark on society or leave something beautiful behind. And what can be better than that? And to any young creatives watching at home, be brave, be brilliant, and never look back, because in today's climate, you are needed more than ever before. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a really inspiring message and a fantastic talk. And I think as a young curator myself, it was a really important message to hear all about his own experiences, especially throughout his 20s and the past decades moving forward from that. And then it was really great to think about what was important when bringing public art to people. That's something that we work to do at Arctic, so it's really important to think about what people want, how to inspire people, and how to really bring a message and connect with people in different spaces. I think day to day, as a curator, we work with so many artists, and I think it's really important to keep in mind their message and what they want to portray through their work, and then just working to enhance that really and making sure that that message is always felt loud and clear. In many different spaces, be it in working environments or on public display as well.
Well, I think it was a very powerful message that what we see visually affects our emotions and therefore our health and well-being, because the body and the mind are an interconnected system and all of our senses are affected. In fact, we live for our senses, basically. And so whether it's art or music, anything in empowers the senses is so important. But to see the art is really important, because in architecture, I think we're very conservative about the use of colour, for example. And I think we ought to really understand and employ much more of the knowledge we do know about the psychology of colour in our buildings. And then there's all sorts of public things. For example, if you're in a hospital, which traditionally are quite dreary decor and so on, if you have changing art exhibitions, chances for community artists, as well as the relief of the stressful situation that art brings to people who are concerned and worried about things. I just feel that in buildings, we really need to pay attention to the fact that our environment affects us socially, physically and mentally. Now, people recognise the physical bit. They don't always recognise that our minds, our brains are affected by things. And that goes into our thinking, into our decision-making processes, into our imagination, into our creativity. Our surroundings are so vitally important. And often they're very utilitarian, functional, but not very inspiring. And I think what Adam's showing is they really have importance at so many different levels. And I think we really need to pay attention to that. And it's not expensive. It's not a luxury. In fact, it's an investment, as we can see from some of the figures he produced on the economics of art value for the public and so on. It's an investment, because happier people are more productive people, are more creative. And that's better for the nation. And it has an impact indirectly on things like the National Health Service, because it's part of prevention better than cure philosophy.